Alrighty. Well, good evening, everybody from Yaesu, USA. Welcome to episode 2 called WiRES-X, the ins, the outs, and the setup. So, welcome to our second episode. For those of you that maybe joined us last Friday, we started a kind of a new thing here with our first episode of Yaesu, the radio show, where we're coming to you live, and we're going to be starting to offer more education, more items for people to, talk about, discuss, get more of a hands-on. So, of course, as you may or may not know, we did have Yaesu, the radio show, the podcast, and a lot of people went along and said, hey, it's great. We love the Yaesu, the radio show, the podcast and everything, but they said, we have one big problem, John. And I said, well, what exactly is that? And they said, sometimes the material and stuff that you talk about, we really, really need a picture to put it this way. So we said, we thought, and we was like, okay, what can we do? How can we help you, the customer? How can we be able to get this information to you and get it to you in more of a clear manner, maybe be able to ask some questions, maybe to do some sort of interactive things, kind of walk it through. And we said, you know what, let's move from the podcast aspect of things. Let's go ahead and move directly into let's doing audio, let's doing video, let's do it all live for you here. So that's where we came up with Yaesu, the radio show. So we did it on Friday of last week, day after Thanksgiving. We had a few moments to kind of sit. We were supposed to be taking it easy. Unfortunately, we decided to go ahead and do some work and stuff like that. And we got a lot of good response, got a lot of good feedback. A lot of people said, hey, I love the show. It's a great idea. It's nice to be able to have sort of a direct connection, as one person put it in an email, a direct connection between you as the manufacturer, the maker of the radios and products that we come to love and everything like that, and to be able to then say, hey, here we're reaching out to you through cyberspace, through everything like that, and basically for here to do it. So that's why we decided to do the show. And we were looking for content and material last Friday. And when it came to content and material, we were like, what can we do? So we started to have a list of things that people wanted or have questions, or we kind of see things that kind of come up from time to time again. And what we did was we looked at it and we said, oh, wait a minute here. Hang on. I know a great topic for our first one, which deals with WiRES-X. A lot of people were getting WiRES-X. They've had WiRES-X for the longest time. They enjoy WiRES-X. They want to be able to use WiRES-X and everything about it. So we said, let's do a show on WiRES-X. And more importantly, what we're going to be looking at here is we're going to be looking at how to do WiRES-X in general, as in like saying, okay, how do you set it up? The ins, the outs, everything like that, as we kind of put it on there. Because what was happening is that a lot of people were saying, I'm not really sure how to do this with WiRES-X. I'm not really sure how to do this or this or this or this. So that's why we said, okay, let's go ahead and do it that way on there. So that's why we're bringing the first show to you here in this manner. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to cover a lot of what we might say or could say would be some general stuff. And if you are a user of WiRES-X, you may say, well, I know this already, John. It's not a problem. This is kind of repeat information. And you know what? For you, it might be. For you, it might be hands down. But there are people out there who are getting into WiRES-X. And more so, not getting into WiRES-X like I got into WiRES-X. Or maybe some other people who might be viewing it got into WiRES-X. And we're talking HRI 200 era WiRES-X. So for people who are getting into WiRES-X now, or maybe got their amateur license, want to experience digital, said, hey, I want to come over to Fusion. I want to see what the fun is, why it's popular, all that stuff. And you're familiar with the PDN operation. And PDN operation is basically where we're using the cables to connect directly from the radio to the computer. We're going to talk about that tonight. That's not a problem. We're going to talk about all that tonight. But we're also going to talk about the HRI 200. And we're going to talk about WiRES-X, and more so the setup, and to kind of end confusion that people may have about WiRES-X. There's a lot of misnomers. There's a lot of, and to be basically honest and brutal, a lot of opinions and a lot of non-factual or improper facts that are put out there about WiRES-X. So that's where we're doing this episode tonight, called Episode 2, WiRES-X, the ins, the outs, and the setup. Now, the reason I said it that way is because WiRES-X is a unique system. And I really like to talk about WiRES-X. And the reason I say like to talk about WiRES-X is because when we talk about WiRES-X, we have to look at how the system is set up, the system is designed, which a lot of people are not aware. A lot of people think it is this, or think it's this, or this sort of matter. And it turns out they're actually wrong. And no offense to those who are wrong. I'm sorry, if you're wrong, you're wrong. But the reason I mean is that how WiRES-X works and how WiRES-X operates. And that's a key point in going ahead and doing that. Now, before we dive into the show fully, if you have any sort of questions, comments, you want to follow up with the show, you want more information, you have an idea for the show, or something like that, go ahead and reach us. My email is right down here, j.crook@yaesu.com. Once again, j.crook@yaesu.com. And they'll send me an email, say, and in the subject line, if you were going to say anything, hey, idea for the show, and comment about the show, put that as your subject, idea for show or comment for show, and then let me know what you want. Now, we understand we're not going to be able to fill every single question. We're not going to be able to fulfill every single detail that we can that may get written in. A lot of our content is coming from questions that might be on our social media sites, that might come in directly to me, that might come in through our Contact Us page, that might come in through our tech support department or a customer service department, or whatever the case may be. So that's where we're going to get a lot of the content for. Now, another little thing about it, you're watching this live on our YouTube channel, Yaesu USA Official. We did have videos out there, and a lot of people like to reference those videos. And guess what? Some of those videos were getting a little old, alrighty? And really, I guess there's no excuse why you can't sit around and make videos all day, but this is where we're going to refresh those videos, redo those videos in these episodes and these formats. We still are going to be able to provide webinars and direct webinars and information about our products and services, as well as still have the option, if you, your club, your group, your organization want to have a specialized training on some of our products, about a specific product, or a club presentation, you still have that option with us. Simply email me, j.crook@yaesu.com. And I'm going to tell you this right away, our 2022 calendar is filling up quickly. Alrighty, so make sure if you got a chance, want to get in there, get a hold of me right away. I will tell you this, January is just about booked. I think I got one more kind of option or time to do a presentation, and February is booking up pretty quick here too. So don't waste time if you want a club, group, or a presentation. So let's get into the heart, let's get into the core of what tonight's episode is going to be. So we have to look at the history real quick of WiRES-X. And this is important because this dictates, this tells us how WiRES-X is going to operate, or why, more importantly, WiRES-X operates the way that it does. Now, WiRES-X came from WiRES 2, which came from WiRES. Now, what that means is that way back in the day, on our office in California, we came up with a concept of saying, how can we connect repeaters? Now, this is back in the 90s, all right? Way back in the mid-90s. And what happened was that people were saying, hey, the linking of repeaters used to be done via RF, okay? RF links and commands and, 220 megahertz or UHF or 900 megahertz or something like that whatsoever. But what was ended up happening was that people said, I need to be able to go further. And my club, actually, at that time, was in that same boat. We used a UHF link up in northern Wisconsin, and we were pushing it. I mean, we were really pushing it. We were doing about 40 watts with a very directional and high gain UHF beam antenna in order to establish that link. And even at that times, there would be times where we would get some interference or weather or something like that and do it. So this came about with saying, how can we start to leverage this really cool thing that started to come out called the internet? Well, that's where we came up with the idea of WiRES. Now, WiRES, believe it or not, used an HRI 100. So a lot of people ask, why is there the HRI 200? Why is that model? Well, because there was already an HRI 100. And the concept of WiRES was very similar to how WiRES-X is set up, where you have people who have HRI 100s tied to either repeaters directly or tied to link radios, and then that would go ahead and feed RF over the air to the repeaters. Now, with that being said, understand back then, there was no such thing as digital. So it was all analog capabilities. So when that happened, you would then be able to sort of connect. Now, I've heard people describe it as sort of like a telephone book where you would have the node IDs, or you can go ahead and sort of like an addressing, whatever the case may be. What was happening is that you would be able to connect node to node, or you would actually be able to connect to a sister group. Now, what did that mean exactly? Well, it meant basically a bunch of nodes tied together that when you connected to that sister group code or command, it would then connect all the repeaters together. Interesting. Sounds a lot like a room on WiRES-X. Now you see how it's being connected. What you would do, though, is that each time you would need to connect, you would have to send that code. So that way it allowed the repeater to operate as normal, or if you needed to, you could send the code through the repeater, and then the repeater would connect into the groups. That's where the WiRES button came into play. Not WiRES-X button, but WiRES button. And as some people called it, like the atom symbol button or the Big Bang Theory button. What you did is you went into the menu of the radio and you entered in the Dtmf node room number or sister group number that you wanted to connect to. And when you would push that button and key your microphone, it would automatically dial that node or group number for you. So there you go. That's how it was. Now, what ended up happening is as we moved from basically WiRES, we came into WiRES 2, which gave us enhancements on the operation of WiRES. And then what ended up happening is that digital came around. Now, when digital came around, WiRES was going to be a great solution to a problem. And that problem was that Yaesu System Fusion, not WiRES-X, but Yaesu System Fusion was not actually allowed to be in a repeated format in some countries and regions of the world. So what happened was this is where WiRES stood up and said, hey, we can improve WiRES, or WiRES 2 in this case, and we can actually make an addition to it and then make it so that this is now a solution for people who cannot use a repeater for WiRES-X. So, hey, great, what an idea. Someone can't use a repeater, but they could still be able to communicate through the usage of WiRES-X. Same principle, same thing. But what WiRES-X added is they added another layer to the system. And how it added another layer to the system is by going and now allowing the digital voice operation to take place as well as analog operation. Remember, Yaesu System Fusion is called that because it is the fusion of analog and digital technologies. Now with the Hri 200, we went along and had the ability to not only communicate using digital across great distances, but still remained analog. But we were also now able to add cross-modulation. And cross-modulation was something that really no other digital modes had out there when WiRES-X came out. And what I mean by that is that you could, as a WiRES-X user, be using digital. You could use your Hri 200, set it up as doing digital, and then go through the WiRES-X network to another user who on the other end was, guess what? Using analog. You can go analog to analog, you can go digital to digital. The options and determinations were based upon what you wanted to do. And the best part about it is all you needed to do was get an Hri 200 and what we call a donor radio. Now, obviously, if you wanted to use digital, you needed a digital radio. So you needed it at the time when it first came out, it was an FTM 400. Later on, we came out with the 100, and now we have the 300 out there. But those are the radios that could actually be used, or you could directly connect it to the repeater. So now you had multiple options. In addition to those multiple options, users could actually set up a node at their house and go and do what they wanted to do or however they wanted to do it and set, so I could have a node at my house. My dad could have a node at his house. If we wanted to connect ours together and just have node to node, and I could be walking around with my handheld, he could be walking around with his handheld or whatever, we could do that. Or we could now connect into rooms, which was the old sister groups on WiRES and WiRES 2. Now when we connected in a room, what happened was that all the different users would point to one room. When they'd point to that one room, they would stay in there. And in that case, you'd have one feed coming in from one user and then rightfully so turn around and go back out to the other users. But it gets better. The way that the Yaesu WiRES-X server and network is really set up is that I call it the decentralized, centralized system. So when you are in your WiRES-X software and you're seeing all the rooms populate and you're seeing all the nodes populate and you have the ability to connect and send a text message or group mode or group monitor, and do all those things, you're actually, yes, pulling data from the Yaesu server. However, when you are connected to a room, you're not actually going to the Yaesu server. You are actually going from your node, your connection to the WiRES-X, to that person's actual room. And that's why the Hri 200 needed a series of ports that were set up. Well, as time progressed, we were in WiRES-X, I'd say maybe a good almost 5 years. And then all of a sudden people started to say, you know what? I can't use my Hri 200 on anything but really a home or LAN-based ISP connection. I need to have ports open. I need to have a global non-NATed IP address so that way when the internet is out there, my Hri 200 actually has an address so people in the interwebs can go ahead and directly see that and come into here. So that's when people started to say, we need another solution. Well, that's where we said, hey, you know what? We know people need a solution. We know people want a solution. Here is our solution. We came up with the PDN functionality. And when we came up with PDN functionality, that meant now you didn't need an Hri 200. You could connect your radio directly to your computer. And we put it out on a bunch of radios too. So you could use your FT2, you could use your FT3, you could use your FT5 as a PDN node. You could use the FTM 100, you could use the FTM 300, and you could use the FTM 400 as a PDN node. And with that PDN operation, you had two types. You had PDN or HRI, and PDN was allowing you to now only connect to digital rooms. Some people didn't want analog users. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But the people that did want analog and digital users, they could go ahead into rooms and connect to rooms. PDN allowed you only to do digital. But there was a trade-off with PDN operation. And that trade-off was you could not host your own room. You need an HRI to host your own room. The other trade-off was that you could not do analog via RF for a PDN operation. If you were using the access point mode, which we'll get to that in 1 second, you could only do it in digital. So that was a trade-off in PDN operation versus HRI 200 operation. HRI 200 was needed for a room, for analog operation, for the uploading of pictures, voice messages, and text messaging. However, with PDN, you could have now two modes of operation. You could have direct, or you could have access point. Direct basically meant that I could connect the cables to my handheld radio and then simply use it like a giant speaker microphone connected to my WiRES-X software. Or I could go ahead and use access point mode. And access point mode basically allowed me to then take, hey, here's my radio, whichever PDN radio it is, connected to my computer, and now it would go and sit here and it would transmit a signal while I could go ahead and use another radio to talk to it. In addition, with those two operation modes on there, it allowed you to, once again, connect either to digital only or digital and analog rooms. And now you didn't need a global non-NATed IP address. You could actually connect to any IP connection whatsoever. So whether you were sitting at the coffee shop, whether you were sitting in the airport, whether you're sitting with your cellular phone and traveling, or your cellular connection in your car, whatever the case may be, as long as you had an internet connection, you were now able to use WiRES-X. And that was a pretty big step forward. That was actually a monster step forward, because now it gave you the ability to use WiRES-X how you wanted, when you wanted, why you wanted. It didn't require you to be connected, because when you were using the Hri 200, you can only use mobiles. So for me, when I was traveling and I wanted to use WiRES-X, if I was a far distance away, I had to try to find someone who had a WiRES-X node, ask for their permission, and then connect to their node, and then ask if I can connect to their node to move it to connect to my node. So that was the nice part. Now I could just take a handheld and my laptop and an internet connection, and now I'm on my way. That's the ins and kind of outs of WiRES-X and how it came to be. What we now need to look at, and what we're going to deal in and dive into here with the rest of the episode, is we're going to first of all, give you the spot, the location on the internet where you can get all the information we are going to talk about. And guess where that is? That, yes, is on our Yaesu.com website. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up my screen here as we take a look at our website here. Guess what? We have the Yaesu.com website. The Yaesu.com website is pretty simple. It's Yaesu.com. But more importantly, what you're going to want to do is you're going to come underneath this Yaesu, the radio symbol here. You're going to go into products. And what you're going to do is you're going to drop down to digital. You're going to click on digital. And when you click on digital, these are all the current product offerings we have for digital Yaesu System Fusion. Scroll on over the arrow over here, and you're going to see the Hri 200. Click on the word Hri 200, and guess what's going to happen? It's going to pull up the screen here, and when it pulls up the screen, look at that. Here is the Hri 200 landing page. Here's the description, tells you all the different things about the Hri 200. But I think the most important part is this tab right here, the Files tab. Click on the Files tab, and look what happened. Now here you have all the links to everything you need. So, the SCU19 driver, if you need that for the PDN operation. Alrighty. If you need the WiRES-X software, WiRES-X PC software, update information, so you need information there. There's firmware if you are not using an Hri 200. I mean, we put out this firmware back in 2014, so everything's new. But here we go. WiRES-X remote monitor software, WiRES-X portable digital node function PC software. So this is the current WiRES-X software right here. Right here. This like, I'll even try to highlight it here real quick. This right here. That is the current WiRES-X software. Version 1.54 was released on August 23rd of this year. 46.69 megabytes. When you go ahead and download this, it's going to come to a zip file. You unzip the file, and it will work right from there. We'll kind of go through a little bit of that there. Now under here, folks, here's the main important thing on here. So when you are going ahead and looking, if you have a DR1X and it is a version 1.10 or later, you're going to be good. You're going to be good for that. Now, when you have an older version, so something of version 1.00, you can't connect WiRES-X to it. Okay, you have to go there. And to upgrade from 1.00 to 1.10 or to 1. I believe it's 20 now with the new firmware on the DR1X FRs, you'd have to, if you're making a big firmware jump, not by the letter, but the number, then you got to send it in to us. Here's a reference manual for the DR2X. So HRI reference manual, if you want to connect that directly to the HRI. But here's even more important part, which we're going to cover. That's what these two things are up here right now. We're going to cover this. Here is the manual. Can't stress that enough. The manual for the Hri 200 instruction manual. 14.2 megabytes. Alrighty. Here is the manual for the WiRES-X PDN, Portable Digital Node Function Instruction Manual. Folks, I cannot stress how much it is important to pull down these manuals because a lot of the questions, a lot of the setups are going to be in these manuals here. All right, so now let's go ahead and switch. We're going to pull up the actual Hri 200 manual here. And we're going to start out with the Hri 200 because there's a lot of questions, people who want to have rooms and stuff on there. So when you download it, guess what? This is a downloadable PDF. With this downloadable PDF, guess what happens? You have it there. You can put it on a tablet. You can put it on whatever. The thing I want to push here, right here, is going to be on page, what is this here, right? Page number 5 of the WiRES-X manual for Hri 200 is talking about the transceiver that you need. And then it also goes ahead and talks about how you have to hook it, okay? So basically, you're going to need either the 400, the 300, or the 100, and the 10-pin mini-DIN, or to set it up as an FM, you can use the transceiver with the 10-pin mini-DIN, or you can go ahead and have anything that has a 6-pin mini-DIN port on there. So for an example, you can use the 400, the 300, or the 100 for analog operation, or you can go ahead and use another radio that has a 6-pin mini-DIN, or now you can use our new FTM 6000, which has that 10-pin mini-DIN, but is only digital. Or excuse me, only analog. It's not digital. My correction. Only analog, not digital. Sorry, I got tongue-tied there. PC. Most important part here. This is extremely important. And the reason that these parts are extremely important is that when you are using a room, that's that decentralized thing where it connects back to you. Okay, that's where it connects to you. So when you have I can't stress this enough here. When you have an HRI 200 in a room setup, okay, you need to have this set up because your computer, your HRI 200, is acting as that server, as that connection point for all of those different rooms, or I should say nodes that are connecting into your room. If you do not have these specs, guess what, folks? Your room is going to suffer quality. Your room is going to suffer operational issues. Alrighty? Can't stress that enough. I've talked about it in different things. Next critical point is this. Internet connection. ADSL 8 megabytes or faster. Alrighty. Global IP address. Dynamic or static address is usable. So what that means is you don't have to go out and buy a static IP address. A lot of people thought you had to buy a static IP address. No, you do not. All right, you do not at all. The other thing is when we're using the HRI 200, you need to have these UDP ports open. 46, 100, 110, 112, 114, 120, and 122. Now, you can open up the whole range. You can manually forward them. Whatever you got to do, however you do in your router, that's how you do, okay? Do it that way. And one of the TCP ports must be connectable when using the remote control function. So what that means is that, and this will be probably in another episode, but when you're using the remote function, a lot of people will think it goes in on these standard UDP ports here. No, it goes in on a different one, and it goes in on a TCP port. Now, there are some kind of things here when running a firewall on your router. It's necessary to open above ports to allow communications with WiRES-X server, because there is universal plug-and-play UPnP. That works, and that sometimes doesn't work. When using an internet connection for multiple companies, you may experience audio interruptions or unusable. So once again, if you're using and you got a ton of people connecting here, if you're just at the bare minimums, you may hear some choppy audio. It may buffer. It may do a couple of things on there. All right. Now, you have to register the WiRES-X node. You're going to have to register that. And in order to register that, Google WiRES-X. You'll see it will go to our WiRES-X website. It is different than the Yaesu.com website on there, but it will go ahead and allow you to register. If you are registering an HRI 200, you will need the serial number for the unit. If you are registering a PDN operation, you will go ahead and need to register the DPID. So starting out with the HRI 200, this is what you get in a box. So you get obviously the HRI 200 unit here, a USB cable for you, the 10-pin to 10-pin cable, a 10-pin to 6-pin cable, the WiRES-X software CD, and WiRES-X user registration guide. Yes, you do get a guide. It goes step by step. Very easy to do that on there. You do have other cables and connectors if you want to buy a different cable of some sort or an additional cable. But as this menu goes through, it's really going to go ahead and start to tell you. So here's that website. Here's that website. Did you notice I put my finger over there? It allows you, it's a clickable link inside the PDF. So you can click it. Here, I'll go ahead and open link in a new tab. We'll go to this new tab here. Hopefully my internet connection is fast enough tonight with all the streaming. But there you go. There's a WiRES-X webpage for registration. Simple, easy, nice to do. If you need to go ahead, you need to register the first time, click member registration. It'll walk you through that. If you already have a user ID and a password, that means usually something has already been registered. Key point here, you need to have a separate or unique user ID per WiRES-X device that is registered. I'll say that again. You need to have an individual or unique user ID per WiRES-X device that is registered. You cannot register multiple devices under one user ID. You use the same email address, you can use the same password, but it needs to be a different user ID. All right, so once you get there, you can go through there and it will give you the node list. It will give you all this information once you've registered, once you got the user ID. But when you come to here, and you're going to go click on it. You can click on some of these things here that allows you to do it, like what is WiRES-X, all that information. User page is going to kind of ask you to log in and stuff. But when you get here, like the node list and the all that details, guess what? You have files for some of our older radios. But more importantly, as we get down here, you will find that the same software for WiRES-X is the same software here. So if you just need WiRES-X software, come on back over to the Yaesu.com page. A lot easier, a lot simpler on there. So that's what the WiRES-X registration is. So we'll go back here. We'll go back to the manual here. What I want to bring up is kind of this part here. So you're going to have to install a USB driver. And this is one of the many, 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 many pitfalls that people will run into when setting up they're HRI 200s. Do not plug in the USB cable between the HRI 200 and the computer first. You do not do that. Don't. Otherwise, you're going to have a really, really problematic time. You want to first click on this. HRI 200. Oops, sorry about that. HRI 200 device setup on there. And when you click on the HRI 200 device setup, that is going to take and register your USB connection in there. So that's what's going to do. It's going to take the USB and register the drivers on there. It will then tell you, so we'll say, there you go, install. It will then tell you when to go ahead and plug in the HRI 200. So just follow the instructions. Once again, download this, unzip it, click this first. It will tell you when to plug it in. Once you get the install done, you're going to do the WiRES-X software and setup. It's going to walk you through. It's going to tell you, here's the pictures of the install on there. And then once you're finished, you're ready to get rocking and rolling. Now, here is the back side of the HRI 200. Very important information here. So here's the front side. Just shows a little power light, green light when it's plugged in, USB-A on your computer and everything. But here, this is the most important part. So this is a USB-B type connector, or sometimes call it the printer USB. There's a monitor port, there's radio 1 and radio 2. So this is where we're going to start talking a little bit more about what are the options for WiRES-X HRI 200 radio and interfacing. So USB connected, obviously, to the computer. This is going to go out to the computer over here. This is what powers the device. This is what converts the radio traffic into the data traffic to go out. Now, looking at here with the radio 1 and radio 2 ports, there are 2 radio ports on here. For most people, they're going to use radio port 1. They're not going to use radio port 2. So here's what radio port 1 does. Radio port 1 is the common operation. So if you have a donor radio, FTM 100, 300, 400, it's going to plug in here. If you have another analog radio that you get one of the different cables to connect to here, it's going to plug in here. But what is this radio 2 port for, John? Please tell us. We're wondering. Inquiring minds want to know. So WiRES-X has a really neat feature, which is really underutilized, hands down underutilized. And the reason I say that is that you have the ability to connect 2 radios to the HRI 200 at one time. Both must be digital radios. And now you're going to be able to plug your voice radio in here. And then you're going to be able to plug in your control radio here. If I had a sound effect and could increase it, I'd be like, what? What that means is, so let's say you are feeding a repeater with this. Just as an argument's sake. Radio 1 would be the radio that's going via RF and feeding the repeater over the air. Radio 2 now would be set up on a different frequency. And what this would do is that it would allow you to handshake on this frequency. Then the radio would reply back and saying, hey, you want to talk? You want to do things? Go over to the frequency that is being used on radio 1. So in other words, you could drive around, and let's say this is on 145.5625, the Fusion Simplex. And let's say this is on my UHF repeater of 444.225. What I could do is I could drive around and then hit my WiRES-X button to do the handshake on 145.5625, calls to here, the radio hears it, talks it, goes to the software says, hey, how you doing, John? Clocks back and says, hey, John, now you need to go over to 444.225 with the 5 meg positive offset to be able to go ahead and connect and send out that information and be able to communicate on there. So what this does is this allows you to have a data or control or a sync channel, as a lot of people have called it, on radio port number 2 here. And then now this allows you to basically then say, okay, hey, now I need to disconnect. I can still send commands. Sorry about that, folks. Still send commands on this channel while the conversation is taking place. Because if you normally have this conversation over here, guess what's happening? You're going ahead and basically you're waiting for a break in the conversation to send commands or disconnect or anything. Now, the final part here is this monitor port. What is this monitor port? Well, the monitor jack is a 3.5 millimeter jack. You see what the pinout is here for. So what this allows you to do is if you hooked a amplified speaker into this, you can hear the traffic coming from the WiRES-X network that is being sent out over your node radio. Because if you think about it, your node radio is transmitting, right? The only way you would be able to hear WiRES-X traffic then is if you had a radio. What if you don't have a radio? What if you're just sitting in your shack and you see traffic and you want to hear it? Well, obviously the radio can't use the speaker while it's transmitting, so you can plug in an amplified speaker. So like a desktop speaker is what I use. You know, it's got a little power cord to it. Something amplified, something that has a volume control in there. If you just plug in a pair of headphones, it's not going to work. If you plug in just a regular set of I don't know, some other speaker that has it on there, guess what? It's not going to go ahead and work for you. So in that case, in that situation, that's where you want to use an amplified speaker for that jack. Now, I'm going to just kind of scroll through some other things here. Here it goes ahead and tells you need an Ethernet connection on there. Now, we do suggest LAN operations, okay? We do not suggest going and using Wi-Fi. Reason being is Wi-Fi can drop and has glitches and stuff like that all the time. Well, you don't want your internet connection to drop. If your internet connection drops, guess what? All the nodes coming into here are going to drop. So you can have that problem. So we tell you, always go ahead and use a LAN connection is our recommendation on there. Here we go. Here's a picture. Here is operating. So here's a 400 for digital operation. And guess what? Here's our old FT8900, the 8800. This happens to have a 6-pin, but our new FTM 6000 has a 10-pin, but once again, it's only going to be analog. Here you go. Connect the antenna to your radio, connect the 10-pin to the 10-pin on radio 1, connect that in there, boom, you're good to go. Now, here's where I was just talking about this. Here is that double transceiver setting. Notice, though, they have to be digital radios. They both have to be digital. You cannot do analog with the double radio operation. So your preset search channel, that data channel, is going to go to radio 2. Your voice channel, your main communication transmitting channel for voice is going to go to radio 1. So there you go. Those are there. One last thing here, a couple things. When using an FM transceiver, to set the data communication port to 1200 baud on the transceiver. Okay? Can't stress that enough on that one. Next one, when using a Yaesu FTM 400, 300, or 100 as a node, turn on the transceiver while pressing the DX and GM keys. That sets the transceiver to the connection-only mode, or what we call WiRES-X mode. And that means that it is a donor radio. You cannot interact with the radio. So when you have a FTM 100, 300, or 400 using it, when you put it in a WiRES-X mode, you can't use the microphone. You can't make adjustments to there. The only thing you can do is power the radio on and off and take it in and out of WiRES-X mode. You get a lot of people that go ahead and state that, hey, guess what? My transceiver, I can't use it. I tried to use the mic. It says TX error, or it's not responding. I can't change frequencies. Correct. When you put your digital transceiver into WiRES-X mode, you basically are turning the brain of the radio off. It looks to the software for its functionality now. Going through a couple things. So we do talk about setting up if you want to do an actual static IP from your computer to your router. So once again, computer to router. We do walk you through some of those steps. Now, granted, some of the things may be different or difficult. It may not appear exact picture. But here you go. Now we talk about opening up the UDP ports. So when we're talking about UDP ports here, this is where it's going to be quite important, because if you don't have these ports set up correctly that I just highlighted here, 46, 100, 110, 112, 114, 120, or 122, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get the dreaded red NGs. If everything is good, then it's going to do its search, and look at, you're going to get the red OKs. So that's the important part and the difference between having ports open and ports closed. Do not panic if your ports do not open. There's a couple different reasons why people have ports that don't open. Could be the internet service provider you have, a slug of reasons, but do not worry about it. Now, the rest of the HRI 200 manual goes and talks through setup, and we're going to go ahead and show you a little bit of that later on. But for right now, this is your setup for the HRI 200. Once again, this is all the downloaded manual available on the Yaesu.com website. So this is what we were just looking at, this manual right here. We're now going to move over to this manual right here, which is the PDN functionality. Same process and stuff, but we're going to go and first of all kind of cover a few basic things on here. So when you have this one here, make sure you're in the right manual because they look very similar in nature. You're going to need some different cables. So just because you don't use the HRI 200 doesn't mean that you don't need a specific set or purpose of cables. So on the FT5, the FT3, and the FT2, you're going to need the SCU39 kit. This is going to include the SCU19, a CT44, and 2 audio cables. To properly do HRI operation in the PDN mode, you need the SCU19, the CT44, and the 2 audio cables. Alrighty. For the FTM 400 to 100, which also includes the 300 now, where you will go ahead and you will need you can do PDN with just the SCU20 that came with the transceiver. But if you want to do proper, or you get the FTM 300, you're going to need the SCU40 kit. That is an SCU20 cable and audio cables. All right. Now, there's a reason that I strongly have to stress having the right cables. Because when you're in PDN functionality, the way that it works is that analog is generated in the radio. So when you're talking into the radio, in this case by another radio into the radio, or you're talking it by microphone or speaker, your analog audio is coming into there, but then the radio does that vocoding and transcoding for you. So it will split the different streams out. So if I actually go down here to access point in portable HRI mode, what you're doing here is you're going there into the radios with another fusion radio. Okay, it has to be C4FM fusion digital radio. Then the radios are taking and saying, okay, I'm going to produce 2 streams for HRI mode. And those streams, one is going to be analog, which is going to go down the audio cables into the computer. Basically, it's for the most part just taking your audio, reconverting it, and going back down. And then it's going to send out digital via either the SCU19 cable for the handhelds or the SCU20 cable for the laptop. If you are in portable HRI mode, remember, you're splitting those 2 streams. But here's what's going to happen. You're going in digital. The radio is converting to a digital stream down the SCU19 or SCU20 cable, but it has nowhere to go. So the WiRES-X software running on the computer is listening on that mic in port for analog audio. If you are not using the audio cables that come with it, guess what ends up happening? The analog user on the other end does not have an analog feed. Their radio is going to key. It's going to dead carry because there's no audio coming down there. So be polite. Don't be that guy or gal and not do WiRES-X operation correctly. We get a lot of calls. People are like, hey, someone was using PDN mode, and every time they talk to us, we heard nothing. We just heard a dead carrier. Okay, well, what room were you in? Well, I'm in this room. Or for an example, they're like, well, let's try it in the CQ America room 2100, which is our Yaesu managed room. And then, well, sure enough, we'll hear the other person talking. We'll say, okay, they're in a mixed mode room, so analog and digital. We'll ask them what are they using, and they'll 9 times out of 10 say, I'm using the PDN functionality. You mean HRI? Yeah, HRI. Okay, do you have an audio cable going from the radio into the laptop? No, I only need the 19 or 20 cable. Wrong, you do not. So that is why it's set up this way. So that's why it's only digital on there, is because the data stream coming from WiRES-X, the audio from the WiRES-X software goes into the radio, and then it converts it into data, because otherwise there's no way for the radio to switch between the different modes on there. So let's talk about the modes first. So think of it sort of as a hierarchy. You have portable digital node mode, and then you have portable HRI mode. And within those 2 modes, you have an access point and you have what they call direct. So starting all the way back up here, whoops, sorry, my mouse rolled too quick. This is access point portable digital node. So when you're in portable digital node mode, you can only connect to digital rooms or other digital stations. Once again, PDN, digital rooms, digital node stations. In PDN access point, you can use the microphone and speaker on the radio as normal, or you can use another radio to talk to it. Be careful, be aware that when you're using access point portable digital node mode, with a speaker and a microphone, not only is it going to come in here and go down WiRES-X, but it's also going to be transmitted out on the radio. So always have an antenna attached to your radio when you're using any of these modes. Now, let's go down here. Direct operation, portable digital node mode. Notice in direct, all you can use is the speaker and the microphone. Because it's direct, no RF whatsoever. However, you can easily hit a button to go from direct to access point. So that's where we stress. We can't stress enough that you need to be careful in these situations. Now, when you have this set up in this mode here, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to use the speaker and the microphone. It's going to go from the radio, it's going to go into the computer, and then it's going to go out once again to digital nodes or digital rooms only. Alrighty, access point mode, portable HRI. So now notice access point portable HRI, you can use RF only, but it has to be digital. But then on the cables, you're going to need the cables from the radio. So you're going to need an SU19 or an SU20, and then you're going to need those audio cables to go into the computer itself to go down there. Now look at this right here. Node stations with the access point portable HRI mode, you can actually talk to digital users or you can talk to FM users. If, as the computer keeps updating here tonight, if you're using a WiRES-X room, you can have digital and analog users, so you can go into mixed mode rooms. Direct operation, direct portable HRI mode. So once again, direct, but portable HRI. Once again, you're only using the speaker and the microphone, no radio, no RF. But once again, you can go into analog or digital nodes, or you can go into a WiRES-X room that has analog and digital users. However, you need the SU19 or the SU20 cable and the audio cable with it. Now I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here a little bit. Gives you the same information, but what's interesting here is when you're registering the radio, unlike the HRI 200 where you need the serial number, you actually are going to need the DPID of the radio. So when you go in there, it will say radio ID. It's going to be a unique 5-digit ID. It can be made a combination of letters and numbers and capitals and lowercase. So just be aware of that. A lot of people will try to enter the registration or the serial number of the handheld or the mobile, and then it gets back and it doesn't work right. Okay, so that's what it is. So let's real quick go over here. We are once again portable digital node mode. So PDN, doesn't matter if it's access point or direct now. You only need the SU19 cable, which is the optional part of the SCU39 kit. The SU19 is not sold by itself. It's part of the SCU39 kit. For PDN operation, regardless of access point or direct, SCU20 cable between radio and computer. Now, if you take a look here, now we are talking portable HRI mode. And once again, you have that SCU19 cable for the handheld, but now you see we have the CT44, which goes from a singular jack to a dual jack, and then the two cables will go to the computer. Now let me go ahead and talk about this area right here real quick, okay? Try to highlight it right there. That area right there. Some people have newer computers that they're using that, guess what? They don't have a separate speaker or mic jack. So you can use, or we suggest, a USB dongle. Alrighty, a USB dongle that can plug into the side here, and then that goes from USB and comes out to the actual 3.5 millimeter jacks. That's usually the best. Some people have tried wide adapters or wide connectors, where it basically takes these 3 type connectors on here, so tip, ring, and sleeve, and then tries to do a wide adapter in there, but sometimes they share the ground, and sometimes people get this horrible buzzing and stuff. We do not suggest using a wide adapter. If your computer doesn't have it, then take a look at actually going ahead and buying a USB adapter. Now, that is for, let me back it up here, portable HRI mode and when you're using it in access point. Now, it's a little different, and this is why people say, well, hey, why don't you just come up with a, single pin to single pin? Well, because when you're using a direct operation, what's going to happen is that you're going to plug in your data jack here, you're going to plug in the speaker mic jack here, but you're only plugging in the speaker out to the mic in. Because when you're using it in direct operation, so portable HRI, direct operation, you will hear digital through the radio, but you will hear analog through the computer. So it's very important to understand that, because we have people call all the time that's saying, hey, I have this setup up here, and I can't hear anything. Now the question is that why in portable HRI mode are you doing that but not in PDN? Well, think about it. Portable HRI, it's taking the digital signal or the analog audio signal into the radio, converting it to digital and transmitting via digital. So it doesn't need to hear a speaker here or speaker here. But for direct operation, you're using the speaker and the microphone here. So it can't take and put the mic input here, and it can't put the speaker out at the same time. Because if you did, when you transmit on your radio, you'd hear a horrible squeal when just using the radio as normal. So that's why you will hear digital coming out of here, but then you will go ahead and hear analog coming out of the computer. Alrighty? Here's a couple of things. So the mobile, same thing. Here's the data jack. Notice that it has like a weird pigtail. With the pigtail is going to come out, and the SU20 is going to connect to that pigtail. Then the audio is going to come out there. There's your speaker. There is your microphone on there. So that's the application of the HRI, or excuse me, the WiRES-X in PDN mode, different than the HRI. So let's go ahead and we're going to now move over to the screen here. We're going to talk about the WiRES-X software. Alrighty, WiRES-X software. Now the WiRES-X software is unique in nature because this is your control center. This is your command center when it comes to the aspects of how things operate and why things do what they do. So this is a standard screen. I'm going to start out in a backwards fashion, and I'm going to start out saying, do not do the following. Do not do the following unless you're going to be registering or using a different node or room number. And that's going here under File, and that's going under Retry Activation. And now it's going to ask, hey, guess what? Do you want me to basically blow WiRES-X away? Do you want me to basically reset it back to 0? No WiRES-X ID nodes or anything like that? If you click yes, you're going to do this. Are you really sure? It's asking you. When it asks you twice, I think that's pretty important on there. Click OK. Boom. My WiRES-X just went back into La La Land. Alrighty. So I'm going to go actually under here. I'm going to go here, open this up. My WiRES-X is started under here. That's another thing I should point out too is here on your system tray, WiRES-X will sit and reside there. So if you're going ahead and doing something on there, if you have WiRES-X on auto start, that's where it's at. People have a lot of times questions. They're saying my WiRES-X always starts up when I started the computer. Well, that's because when you're doing a setup, you blew through the screen there that said, do you want WiRES-X to start up on there? So I'm going to go actually and close this here screen here. See my dirty desktop. Now notice, hey, there's no node or room number here. So here's the screen that's initially going to pop up. Do not panic. Did you just see what happened, folks? Let me go ahead and do this again. I'm going to close this. Okay. I'm going to open it up again. No room, no node number, no nothing. And here's what's going to happen. It's going to open up. Oh my God. I can't. It's grayed out. Don't panic. Here's what's going to happen. Boom. Did you see that? That is my serial number of my HRI 200. If I was using a PDN setup, I would go ahead and I would be using the DPID. I should see the DPID of the radio in there. When you notice, when this was blank, these were grayed out. You can't add anything in here. I can't add or delete. Here, I'm going to hit the backspace button here. I don't know if you can hear me. I can't do anything because this is a read-only field from your WiRES-X device. If you don't have a true WiRES-X device, you are not connecting it to the actual WiRES-X network. You need something to get into the WiRES-X software. Now, once it sees the serial number for the HRI 200, or once it sees the DPID of the actual radio itself, so what you had to go into radio to get, once it sees one of those, you can enter the node ID. Well, my node is 33369. Now, that's my node number. Remember, when you get issued an ID, you're going to get a node number and then a 10,000 number split up. So, in essence, 43369 is going to be your room number. So, if you have a node that starts with a 1, your room is going to be a 2. If it starts with a 3 like mine, it's going to be a 4. If it starts with a 5, it's going to be a 6. If it starts with a 7, it's going to be an 8. So once I have that number in there and the room number in there, now I'm going to hit ID entry. And guess what's happened? Boom, looked. Everything populated. Everything's good. There's a user ID. There's my call sign that's registered. There's the room name that I have on there. my city, my state, my country. It says ID complete. Now I can click OK. Now it's going to pop up. Hey, is this all correct? So my call sign is issued to us what I entered when I subscribed, when I registered my radio. But if I want to change my user ID, now I have mine listed as N9UPC home because I have multiple WiRES-X devices on the air here. If I want to change that, I can change it. So let's say I wanted to change it to N9UPC N9UPC work or N9UPC station, whatever I want to do. If I want to change that there, I could do that. But a couple things here. When it says max is 10 bytes, so let's go ahead and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can only have 10 characters. You cannot have any spaces, and they cannot duplicate it. So I can't have two WiRES-X setups that both say N9UPC home. They need to be unique. If someone else is already using it, it will error out at you. This screen here is important. This is going to tell you how your node is going to operate. So is it open or is it GM, which is group monitor? Now the reason it can do group monitor is because it's connected to an HRI 200 and it is also connected to a digital radio. Now the news settings, I can have all of it, download only, QS only. So there's a couple different news settings, which we'll go into maybe in a different episode. I'm going to click apply. And once I click apply, guess what? Input new user ID. If I needed to change it, it would. Since I'm not changing anything, nothing's applying or changing. Now, I can put this in here. I can put comments in here. The info text, I can put that, whatever I want to put it in there. So I can kind of make it a little bit more of a localized thing. Location settings. This is if I go ahead and do data on there. The data is going to pull off the GPS on there. When it goes ahead and does round QSO room settings, this is where it's going to set up your room. So notice the room ID, notice your Dtmf ID. If I want to set up my room, I need to click on there. My room is not active, so it doesn't come naturally active. You're going to have to click on room activation. Now, you have to determine, is it an open room, which is analog and digital? Is it an open room, digital only? Is it a closed room, meaning I can only invite people? Or is it a group monitor room where your radio and your donor radio is going to continually ping and ping and ping and everything like that? Once again, here's your new room settings. So I'm going to leave it as N9UPC. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do N9UPC and I'll do dash, was on my keyboard here. Let's just put it as room. So ROOM. So now notice we're at 16 bytes. So rooms can have 16. Node names can only have 10. So now N9UPC-room can't change these two fields. I want it to be open, digital, and analog, and my new settings are okay. Now I click room activation. It's going to take a moment, and then it's activating it through the WiRES-X network. So it's actually calling. Now look at this. Room ID change complete. Click OK. Now my room is active. Now I can put whatever I want to in there, okay? Blah, 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 blah. So when we're doing testing. Now, a couple other things we're going to get to in a moment. I'm going to close out of settings here right now. The next biggest thing you're going to need to worry about. All right, I'm going to make this full screen so you can kind of see down. Kind of see it down here. See where it says online in the lower right-hand corner? That online is important, but that is only going to show online. Alrighty, that is only going to show online if you come under port checks and all your ports are okay. If you have any of these ports that say NG, a red-colored NG, you got to find out where this is happening. These are the ports representative 46100 through 46122. All right, so like we talked about earlier, those ports that you need to have open. If you are not manually opening ports, click on automatic UPnP. That stands for Universal Plug and Play. And then you can click Start, and then your WiRES-X software is going to try to go through your computer to try to open up the ports on the router. That does and does not work. I always hard assign it's not that hard. We do kind of walk through it through the manual. So now I see that everything's okay here. I'm going to go ahead and close it. All right. Now, what you're going to notice here is this is where that centralized and decentralized thing real quick. So this is pulling off of the Yaesu servers to say, hey, I'm going ahead. I'm trying to get here. Starts up with the node rooms first, and then it's going to go ahead and populate with the room list in there. Alrighty. This area here is very important. This is where if you are starting to have issues or problems or something like that, this is your feedback screen, which tells you kind of what's going on. Sort of like almost, you can even say a debug screen. So that's going to be important. So like when I want to connect to a room, I'm going to connect to, let's say I'm going to connect to the Yaesu USA CQ America room. I'm going to click there. Here, what a call started to room 21000. I'm going to close this here real quick. Tells me, hey, there's 3 nodes in there. So that's going to give me all that news and information on there. If I go ahead and disconnect, I disconnected through there. Now I'm disconnected. So this is going to tell you all that info. And the reason that it tells you all the info is watch. Let's do it again. Connect to room 21000. Now watch. Here's what I can do. I can go ahead and close this and close this. Well, am I connected to a room or not? Well, first glance, you can see, yeah, I'm connected to CQ America. It says net digital, meaning I'm connected in a digital voice format. If I was in analog, it would say analog up here, but I'm connected in I'm using a digital radio to talk to it. Now, look at that. I'm connected to CQ America. So I want to disconnect, disconnected. There we go. I've disconnected from that room. As this populates here a little bit more, we'll go ahead and see that. Let's go under File now, and let's go under Transceiver. So this is where you're going to do a lot of that functionality. Now, this functionality here is because I'm connected with an actual HRI 200, I can select FM or I can select digital operations. If you only have PDN, you cannot select this. PDN or HRI portable mode, you're only stuck in digital because this is how it's talking over the air. Alrighty. You can set your frequency here. So I use digital and I use a little bit of a splinter frequency for me. It's where you can set your DJID if you want a little more privacy or controlled access. You can set your power, high, medium, or low. I usually run mine on medium and I have cooling on there. Tells you your different frequencies. So if you're actually using a repeater, you would actually then want to change it. Now it's kind of weird because this is going to be your main receive frequency. So I say that because people say, well, wait, how do I add a connection to a repeater? Now I'm in the Midwest here, so let's say we're going to program it for my repeater. So I'm going to enter the receive of 444.225. I use a DGID of 55 on mine for connection to WiRES-X. So there's there. Now if you take a look at it, it says, whoop, uplink receive is there and downlink transmit is there. Now what I want to do is like, no, my repeater, I need to transmit into my repeater on 449.225. So I'm going to enter 5.000 and then just hit tab. Now look at it. I went plus 5.0, so it's automatically going to default to plus. Now it's going to transmit on 449.225 and receive on 444.225. For some reason, if you need to reverse the frequency, you click reverse. Now look what happens. 449.225 for receive, transmit at 444.225. Some people have that for different reasons. If you want your frequency stuff to be hidden, then you can click hide frequencies. And where would this come into play? I'm going to put this back here for right now, so because I was using it as my spare node. All right. So a lot of people go ahead and they ask and they say, hey, here's the deal. Why would I hide my frequencies? Where am I hiding that frequency information at? And the frequency information is going to be right here. So if you don't want people to know what frequency you're on, click that hide frequency and you can go ahead and hide it. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and move this over here a little bit. And you can click on these to do organization too. And I'm going to go to my node room. Well, it's still populating on there. But you can go to your node, there we go. You can go to your node room and then you can click hide frequency and it wouldn't show there. So you see these people here, these people have their frequency hidden. So where you see the gap there, the frequency is hidden on there. All right, that's under Transceiver. So that is where you're going to be, how you set that up when you're in HRI 200 or when you're an HRI portable node. PDN, you're going to adjust on your radio itself. Okay, so PDN is on its radio itself, but HRI mode, whether it's the HRI 200 or the HRI portable node, you're going to go ahead and always adjust the frequency in here. All right, let's go through a couple other things. Let's get back over to settings here. So this is where we're going to start to dig in a little bit for our analog users. So if analog users on there, I see a few people in the comments saying, hey, analog operation. Here's where this is really kind of cool that comes into play. So this is the HRI 200 setup. You do not really need to worry about this in any way, shape, or form unless you're going to be connecting it really to a non-Yaesu radio or connecting it to a non-Yaesu repeater. This right here is where you're going to be able to select what you want to do. So first of all, when you come here, hit the HRI 200 information. This tells you how it's set up. So this is telling you how it's set up right now, so it allows you to do change. So squelch active, do you want active high for a core, or do you want active low? So when a signal is received from the HRI 200, do you want it to go plus 5 volts, or do you want it to go down to 0? Oops, sorry about that. Normally, a lot of people use it on high. They like active high. Alrighty, receive in select. We can have either 9600 baud or 1200 baud. Input for receive 1200. You want it low or high. Input for receive 9600. You want it high or low. Same thing. PTT active. How are you going to key it? Do you ground out the PTT pin to key it up, or do you actually go ahead and apply voltage to it? TX out gain. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and figure out which one you're dealing with for transmit output there, you need to determine if it's going to be the transmit on the 1200 baud or the 9600 baud. You have now a couple different things. You can do de-emphasis, receive filters, audio mute for squelch on there. If you need to boost up your audio, transmitting filters, if you sometimes get a CT/CSS hum or buzz, all these kind of things are in there. Mute mode. You could turn on mute mode, so when you're sending Dtmf commands, it's going to audio mute it so people aren't hearing it. And then to Dtmf detect gain. Sometimes Dtmf puts out low volume. Maybe you need to do it low or high. Dtmf call cancel. You can go ahead and select different tones of what you want to do or how you want to cancel it. So you have a lot of functionalities that you can do in there. When you are done, make sure you go ahead and write it to save the settings in there. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty problematic. Call settings. Really kind of important on here. Round QSO room connection. On permits or off rejects. This is going to be something that a lot of people use, is if you want to keep your HRI 200, or I shouldn't say that, if you want to keep your connection to a WiRES-X room in that room and not have people come along and disconnect it and move it to another room, you want to turn that off. Otherwise, leave that on and people can operate the room. Accept calls when around QSO room. So what this is going to allow you to do is it's going to say is, hey, let's say I'm sitting in CQ America, and all of a sudden, let's say my dad wants to get a hold of me or something. They can connect from his node to my node. It will kick me out of that room to 1000, and then it will move me over to his connection. However, if I want to go back to the room after I'm done with that, after we disconnect, I would check this box there. This is the return to room. Now, the return to room is anytime someone disconnects, after a set period of time, usually about 10 to 15 seconds, sometimes maybe a little bit more, it will go, and if you have this checked, it will allow you to go to the back to that room automatically. So if, let's say, I disconnected and I go to another room I know for a net, I'll use this to talk on the net and everything. When I send that disconnect command, they will go back to an idle state, and after about 15 seconds or so, if I had this checked, it would go back to room 21000. Or you could actually put in a node if you want to. So if I wanted to put in my other node, I could put that in there. So then it would disconnect and would connect into the other node. So you could put whatever you want into there. I'm going to put it back to 21000 for me. Now, when you're talking about Dtmf return to room cancel command, what you can do is if you turn this on, and let's say you disconnect from a room, but you don't want to go back to that room. So disconnect from the room, and then you could send it pound 55555. It will disconnect that for you until you connect back to another room. So it's kind of a stopgap if you need to. General settings. Now this is important. This is not a transmit timer. This is a situation of how long you will stay in a room until it will automatically pull you out of that room. So let's say, for an example, I normally sit in the CQ America room, 21000. But let's say I go to another room for a net. And let's say I know that net is going to go ahead and be 30 minutes. So I'm going to change that to 30 minutes. I'm going to go back here and click return to room. Now what I'm going to do here is if I go to another room, even if people are talking, once that 30-minute timer hits after the connection is made, 30 minutes hit, I'm disconnecting from that room. It's going to wait, and then it's going to go back to here. If I don't have this return to room connected, what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead, and it's going to take 30-minute reaches. Boom, it disconnects, and it just is going to sit there idle. If I click unlimited timeout timer, I will stay in that room until I send the disconnect command. Now, you notice that there's these announcements here. This is for analog operation. So if I set my radio to the transceiver back under file to there, I can go ahead and set this, and then it would make announcements. Connect, request, from, room, whatever, or whatever, how it goes. These are kind of like your prompts if you want it on analog only. The reason you don't have it on digital is because it all comes through your display. If you want to do remote control operation, meaning like using the WiRES-X remote monitor, then you need to set this up, and then you're going to need to select a password. Digital ID settings. So this is if you wanted to transmit in digital ID. We'll go ahead and we'll send out that intervals, because some people, if they're not using digital or using analog, they may need to do that. You can make list files here if you want to. This is going to be probably for another episode later. And you can make log files. So log file for the node is like who it connects to or goes through your node. A news file is there. I have a room file that I used to dump into it. And what that would allow me to do is it would allow me to go ahead and see is like anytime people connected, if I went to rooms, those kind of things, what was going on in my room. I turn that on to save it, and then I could pull it up at a later date. So that's really basically the settings on there. You have different settings that you can go through here. These are more so customizations. So there you go. There's the node room. Biggest thing here, I already did it on mine, but need to really, really, really go ahead and stress making sure that you have your audio set. The manual tells you how to set up your audio level. So make sure you have that set up correctly, because if you're too hot on digital, it's going to sound horrible. If you're too low on digital, it's going to sound horrible. Analog is even more susceptible. Too hot on analog, too low on analog, it's going to sound horrible. And believe it or not, here's like 35, 10 to 100%. A lot of people, I just crank it up to about 50 and leave it there. No. Go through. Take the time to set up your WiRES-X node correctly, folks. I can't stress that enough. You know, we walk through people all the time. News bulletins here. You can do news. Like this is all the stuff that I've uploaded. So I uploaded from my handheld. I uploaded a voice file on there a couple times. Let's see here. So I uploaded pictures. I've uploaded voice. People have done that. So yeah, a lot of different stuff you can do here. Once again, it's all in the manual for you. And I hate to say it that way. Mobile user list is probably going to be the most important thing. These are all the people that have come through my node, whether I'm connected to a room, whether I'm connected directly to them, whatever the case may be. So I do a lot of time in CQ America. So on the 25th of each, or 21st, I'm sorry, of each month, this gets pretty full on there. But you can see all the information there. Alrighty. So that's kind of the overall of the WiRES-X software. I'm just going to go one more time here. Once again, port check. Port check is really important. If port check goes NG, once again, do not panic. Start to peel the layers from the onion is what I say. And the way you do that is you stop, you take a moment, you say, are my ports open on the WiRES-X software? No, NG. Okay, are they open in my router? Are they open? Is something in my computer blocking it, such as like a firewall or something? If it's open on your router, if it's done correctly, if it's open on your computer and everything, it might be your ISP. Some ISPs will block these ports because they see pulling this data from servers, let's say in Japan. So then they go ahead and they get quite concerned because they're thinking, oh my goodness, something's being hacked or something like that. And ISPs can be quite problematic sometimes. But they do that. They're trying to look out for your best, which doesn't always necessarily work. But if it says ports are no good, but you still see it says online, 9 times out of 10, this node control port is going to be okay. This is going to be NG, and the rest of these are going to be NG on there. So that's really kind of it about WiRES-X. Not that hard and not that difficult to get up into it on there. I'm going to switch back over here. So just a little bit of things that you need to do. Some things you need to set up. Not problemsome. Once again, not very difficult to do on there. I do see a couple questions that are coming up in the chat here, so I guess I want to hand kind of answer some of those. First of all, let's go ahead and I want to welcome the people that are there. So Nick Smith, good evening for checking in. Josh Wesley, Abe, I'll go with your call. KC3QBP, Bruce KC9LPQ. Let's see, Chuck KB8YIT, Kibby8820. And then Bob TK. So a couple questions there. So we'll look at him here real quick. World ROM. I'm sorry, I skipped over there, so I just can't see without my glasses, I guess. Hope to hear more about the analog side of System Fusion 2. So really, the analog side is just that. It's that simple. Connect an analog radio, use an analog transceiver on there. Biggest thing you're going to go ahead and talk about or see with analog is that when you want to connect to rooms, you're going to have to enter the Dtmf IDs of the room on there. So you're going to do pound, you want to connect to CQ America, so you pound 21000. You're going to send those commands, the node's going to connect. Star to disconnect. So that's there. Digital, you don't have to do that, because if you know the ID, you just enter ID on the keypad and hit it, and then it sends it via that data stream or connect on there. You can't send actually DTMF through digital with Yaesu System Fusion on there. But that's going to be the big difference between there. Otherwise, operationally, no different whatsoever. Your radio is going to be set with the frequencies and stuff on the radio itself. The controller, there's no way to turn off the brain of an analog radio on there. So just kind of an FYI kind of point on there for you. What's the reason for excluding analog operation from a PDN? Once again, it came down to the vocoding on there. There was really kind of no way in the design of the way the setup was, because remember, this came out years after WiRES-X was operation, to switch the radio into transmitting analog. Plus, the vocoding needs that digital signal to in the radio itself to vocode and go back. So that's why there's no analog RF operation of the PDN operation. You still get the actual stream of analog when you're using the SU39 or the SU40 kit, but you're not going to go ahead and get RF via analog on there. So a good question came up here is HRI 200 port needs to be repurposed to functionality exact like port 1. That way we can operate a digital side or an analog side using the HRI 202 radios. Actually, there's no way to possibly do that. And here's why. When you are using the operation of the HRI 200, the port 1 is only for audio. Port 2 is strictly data. There's no way to port audio over to port 2. You can switch the radio on there, but when you're using the HRI 200, you have to select a mode of transmission. So if you select a digital RF transmission, it's going to come into the HRI 200 on digital RF, but then it breaks the streams and send the streams down to the network. But you still have to come to a focal point to do that. You can only route that audio through the one port. Port 2 was always designed to data, is always purposed as data. That's how the HRI 200 did it, because once again, what was happening, and I'll give you a good case example how it's been used in other parts around the world. The way it's used in other parts around the world is that they have kind of a quote-unquote preset frequency so that users can just drive around, or WiRES-X user can walk around, and then simply, instead of trying to have a bunch of memory channels like, oh, this is the node here, and this is the node here, and this is the node here, and this is the node here, they just have one frequency. As a matter of fact, this is a good case in point to prove something or discuss something. Back in the day, people said, why can you not do a DSQ and then DGID? Why can you not do a DGID per the memory channel initially? And the reason that you didn't, and the reason we designed it that initially that you could not, is because if you're using the same frequency, and all you would have to do is you just have to program that one frequency for fusion connections, you simply went along and just had to change DGID. So if I'm using, let's say, my node here, and I want to handshake with my node, I could say, let's set to DGID 1. But let's say I go 10 miles away, and I know someone else has another node, but they're on DGID 2, guess all I have to do? Switch it to DGID 2, stay on the same frequency. And that's why DGID and way back in the day, DSQ was global to the radio. It wasn't actually per specific channel. That's why the 400 still is that way. As time has progressed, and as we've evolved with Fusion and IMRS technology with the repeaters, which we'll do a show about IMRS later, by the way, people have asked about that. That's why we started to say, okay, yes, now you can put it into the memory channels. Radios become more advanced, memory is more available, designing was easy. Older original radios like the 400, you can't do it still that's that there. So good question actually on there. If not using HRI 200, how do I choose between PDN and HRI modes? Once again, go ahead and read down the manual, but it's basically going to be is how you turn the radio on. So if the radio is completely off and it is in normal operation mode, meaning you can just use like a regular radio, if you want to turn on the radio into HRI mode, not HRI 200. Well, actually, HRI 200 works for us too. You're going to push and hold the DX and the GM buttons on the mobile and then turn the radio on. If you want to turn it on in PDN mode, you're going to go ahead and hold the DX only button and turn on the radio. In the handheld, you're going to use a combination of either the X and band or the X and back buttons. That's what you're going to do on there. So hold the X and band, turn the radio on, or the X and back and turn it on. Once again, this is actually in two places. Not only the PDN operation manual for WiRES-X, but it is also in the WiRES-X supplemental manual that is available on the files page of each of the radios that have the ability to do PDN on there. Alrighty. Well, thank you for tuning into our second episode. I know it was kind of a long episode, but that's somewhat these shows, these episodes are going to be about, where we're going to take a chance, we're going to take a look here and get into that nitty-gritty stuff to do that. Normally, we would do this through a webinar, but having a live show that people can watch, now people can be able to go back and actually re-watch the episode after it's going to be done. So it'll be posted usually right away afterwards. People can kind of do step by step. Hey, wait a minute. I remember John telling me about how I need to do this and this and this and this. Great. Go ahead, look back in the episode on there. We have some more episodes coming up here. So we're gonna be looking at doing these on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. If there seems to be more of a time that people are saying, hey, a little bit better. Maybe I want to watch it. Maybe we could do it on Thursday nights or something. Send us once again comments, questions, whatever. Right down here, j.crook@yaesu.com. Once again, in the subject of the email, put show suggestion, comment on it, whatever the case may be on there. So until then, I want to say thank you to everybody that checked in. Remember, if you like our channel, you want to be notified when next upcoming episodes are, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on there. We will go ahead and make sure that, then you'll get the notices and stuff out there. Once again, tune in Wednesday nights. I said 8 o'clock. Let me correct myself here for U.S. time. 6 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Central, or 9 p.m. Eastern. That's when the show airs for the different time zones. If you can't catch the live show, don't be afraid to go ahead and click on the replay then. So until then, 73 from everybody here at Yaesu USA. Thanks for tuning in and stay safe.